Welcome to Revcast, a Civilization podcast focused on its console platforms.
I'm Joe B. Reeves.
Grayson.
L. Thrasher.
I like the idea that you have a friend who...
I have more than one friend.
Well, yeah, no, you know what I mean. Our topic for this show is England. We're going to study the English this time with English leader Queen Elizabeth. Strengths and weaknesses and just an overall view before we talk about how to win with her. Starts with monarchy. Kind of biggie.
Yeah.
+1 longbow archer defense. Her medieval is +1 naval combat. Her industrial is +1 production from hills, and her modern, which nobody ever makes it to, is her naval support is doubled, which I can't imagine how great that goes.
Yeah, that's one of the best bonuses in the game.
Yeah, but how often do you actually make it to that?
With the English, I'm actually trying to get to the modern, and they have good bonuses to make it there.
So do you think England is one of the civilizations that you can actually win in an endgame without combat, or is that one of the ones that you save?
Oh, no.
Okay.
It's all about the combat in the endgame with England, because maybe we should work up to that.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, we piqued the interest, and people will want to stay on for that. Okay, so to win, how do you start your early game as an English civilization? Where do you want to park?
Just as an overview, I think the English are a pretty good civilization. They can do a lot of good things. They can be fairly powerful in technology. They can have knights fairly early on, and that's fairly powerful. They get a little culture in the early game, which is good. Starting with the monarchy technology means that you instantly have access to dye, which is the only sea tile that has a trade bonus. Trade meaning gold or science, depending on how your city's set. A dye tile will give you 5 trade instead of 2, which is what a normal sea tile gives you. So that's obviously, if you can get some dye going early on, that's a pretty significant advantage that the English have. Some people like to move their settlers and try to find dye with London. I strongly recommend you do not do that ever.
Right. But El Thrasher will always tell you never move your settler no matter what, pretty much. I like to move my settler.
Right. I think we hit that. Every show we argue. Thrasher says never. Grayson says never maybe.
Well,
I do with the Russians. I do with the Egyptians sometimes.
You're right. But
I can see argument for the Spanish, but never the English. Never.
It's a common thing you see online, but to get 1 dye square in a 2-pop city early in your capital is not going to help you do what you need to do in the early game, and I don't recommend it. If you have dye close by, it's better to have it for your 2nd and 3rd city, which can be bigger cities and can probably do a lot more for you later on.
Because if you're working that dye in London, then how are you ever going to have 2nd and 3rd city? Where are you going to make the settlers out of? You're not growing very much. You're not producing very much. You're just getting trade. So just agreeing there. Early in the game with the English, you also have the +1 defense longbow archers, which are really good. They're a very cheap unit that defends very well, although I still don't like to research bronze working right away and start making archers right away, because I want to put out warriors so I can get some gold, explore the map a little bit, and I want to grow London so I'm getting a little more culture and get that great print faster, and then I can hopefully start producing settlers in London. Expand, get some cities out on dye, and if you have the dye nearby, and if you're not pressed too severely early on, then you can have a very, very strong start with the English.
Definitely. One thing I would add about starting out from the very first turn, it seems like a lot of games you'll get set right next to a hill with the English. And I think that has something to do with their industrial bonus where you get +1 production from hills. Them and the Spanish get set next to hills more than any other civs. I still don't move my settler that much unless maybe I'm facing like the Zulu or the Aztec and I just don't want any surprises, but it's pretty rare that I'll move on top of that hill. It's pretty easy to defend a hill with one of those longbow archers. Just a single unit on top of that will keep people from using that hill against you.
That longbow archer will have 9 defense to protect that hill, and if you put an army up there, then it becomes an absolutely ridiculous 27 that nobody's going to beat in the ancient era.
Right.
And we'll cover that later, but whenever I come upon the English in a local game, I feel compelled to reset. But we'll cover that later on when actually how to...
I know that feeling, what you're talking about. They can block off so much of the map, and that's because they start with monarchy. They grow pretty big around their capital, and then they've got that longbow archer defense, and that's tough to break through. Once they got an archer there, a horse army is going to have a hard time even killing one of those, because in their capital, a longbow archer has 7.5 defense. That's tough to deal with. Those longbows are pikemen. They have the same stats as pikemen, but they cost only 10 hammers.
Yeah, they have the ability to rush.
They're an excellent defensive civ, and you can win a lot of games just online with them once you get your archers, because a lot of people just want to rush and try to get what they can early and try to get some quick wins, but they run into a wall against the English.
Do you find the English is a popularly chosen civilization online? Is it one that people kind of rush towards, or
no?
Has it gotten beyond that? No?
There are some dedicated England players out there.
Definitely.
But they're not real common. It's not like China or Zulu or the Aztecs or the Egyptians or the Spanish. I think those civs are all more popular.
One of my friends online, Dan the Chan, I'll give another shout out there.
Shout out!
He said something that I really agree with. He doesn't fear going into a game with a bunch of Chinese players or a bunch of Zulu or Aztec or anything. But if he sees a decent player with England, he's scared. He knows that player's probably got a lot of skill, doesn't rely on a rush, and is going to be really hard to kill. And I agree with that. You're in for a game, and it's typically little higher skilled players online that use the English, and they've got a lot of great strategies.
It's a forward-looking civ, though. I mean, you have to park yourself next to hills very early on to be able to take advantage of them later, and you have the ability to be slightly isolationist at the beginning with the strength of the culture and the strength of the defense, that you'll be able to park your archers strategic locations to keep people from even approaching you.
But by the same token, there are a lot of civs that lend themselves to early horse rush, and the English don't really. I've never tried it, to be honest. Just never really seen a reason to horse rush with the English.
I don't.
So in that sense, you may not get to be as aggressive in the ancient era as you would like, unless you get knights early. You could run into a situation where an Aztec player is like, England, and just moves on and then takes out everybody else, and then you find yourself in a disadvantage where the Aztec player takes over a bunch of capitals, gets navigation and code of laws and religion and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
I think, honestly, England has great defense because your culture could prevent attackers from healing, and you've got the longbow archers, and you might even be able to flip a city back if you lose it. But they're also not really good at being super aggressive in the early game. Although, one way to be aggressive is to make some of those longbow archers and just go put them on your opponent's tiles. Can't do anything. They're not going to be able to kill them very easily. The longbow archer in a forest or on a hill will have 4.5 defense, which is just a royal pain to deal with. We should explain exactly what monarchy does.
It's actually not that great. It does help you get that first great person, but basically all monarchy does is it doubles your palace culture in your cap, only in your London in this case. You start out the game, you have like 2 or 3 culture, but after about 10 turns, you grow to 3 population. Normal civs will only have 5 culture per turn, but the English will have 10 culture per turn, which is pretty good. You're doing it a lot quicker than most, pretty much anybody other than the French.
Your culture is equal to the population of your civilization with a maximum of 5. So the double, then you go to a maximum of 10.
Right. So it's always capped at 10. Nothing else.
Right. But even though it has one positive, it doesn't have any negatives.
Right.
Right.
It shares itself with Republic that it doesn't have any horrible negatives to it.
Right.
At least it's got that, and it's an early one that nobody else is going to have that early in the game.
Well, definitely.
And you won't be able to push it to other cities, but at least you have something where other people are going to be running with despotism.
That's exactly right. It's better than despotism, and it's great in the early game because you're going to get your first great person about twice as fast as anybody else. But then after that, it doesn't really matter that much. And as soon as you get to Republic, you should go to Republic. And later in the game, you probably want democracy or fundamentalism or communism. All those are going to be better than monarchy in the later game.
But basically, I find on average with the English, you get that first great person about 1000 BC, which is about 10 turns sooner than a normal civ. Somewhere between 1500 BC and 1000 BC. So it is a pretty good deal. That's usually before I get to Republic or right about that time. But their first great person is commonly like a great leader, which isn't a bad thing at all. For other civs, that's not the best great person to get. But for the English, it is, because they can get knights really fast. And that's the other big bonus of monarchy. All you need is horseback riding, and then feudalism will appear on the tech tree. And so you can have knights in the ancient era, which no other civ can do. That's a common strategy online, and that's a kind of a good Hail Mary rush or a good surprise attack is you have early knights, and people have got to deal with that. If you get a scientist for that first great person, you can just automatically have knights and then hopefully get a good BC knight rush going on.
And if you're still an ancient, if that feudalism is your fourth tech, like maybe you start with monarchy, you get bronze working probably to defend yourself, you get horseback riding as your third tech, and then you get feudalism, still only at 4 techs, which means that you can rush knights for 50 gold. You get the first one free, and 100 more gold, and now you have a knight army.
Oh, boy.
Now, Elder Usher, do you do that often? Do you do the early knight rush?
Well, it depends on who I'm playing against, because that's not really my favorite way to go, mainly because my knights have a bad habit of losing to archer armies, 18 to 12.
Yeah.
So if I've used my scientist and spent 100 gold and I'm veteran for some reason, maybe I built barracks, maybe I killed some stuff, and then I lose all to somebody's archer army, well, that's just,
Yeah.
If I think I can tech up and stay competitive and eventually get to the modern era and use my double naval support to win the game, that's going to be much more reliable. But I have had games where there's like a Chinese player who's just spitting cities all over the map, going to have 25 cities by the time I'm even in industrial or something like that. He's going to have tanks way before I have cruisers or anything like that. So I need knights right now, and I need to go at him full force, and that's worked in the past. Because those cities are not going to be well defended.
Yeah.
You take a few, and suddenly the tables have turned. Chinese guys putting 4 pop cities all over the map, and now they're all mine. So it works pretty well.
Well, that's kind of my feeling as well. For the ancient era knight, I almost never do it. I'll do it sometimes quickly in the medieval era, but the thing is those knights cost 25 hammers apiece, so 75 hammers per army. Plus, you probably want to have a barracks because a non-vet knight army has only 12 attack, so you want to have that 18 attack. That's a lot of stuff to put into so early in the game when you probably don't have that many cities. If you're doing it in the ancient era, you have cities that are only 2 or 3 pop, probably don't have that much gold coming in after the barbs are all gone. It's very hard to pull off. If you do have some kind of great production city somehow, or if you're just swimming in gold, if you have the 7 cities of gold maybe, well, why not? I'll throw a knight army at them if I'm doing this well anyways. Maybe I can give them a little mercy kill instead of waiting until the modern. But typically, I find I can pace myself with the English. I don't have to do this. I can still get all the other techs that I need to and start building a good solid foundation and still have knights coming out faster than the other Civ. I can try to get navigation first or currency or code of laws and then go back and get feudalism. Can pick whenever I want to do it instead of I have to work like other civs got to get monarchy first and I've got to do this and I got to do that, and it takes a lot of time just to work yourself up to have the option to research feudalism with other civs. The English, you have the luxury of being like, well, do I want to do it really soon or do I want to hold off? Do I not even want to do it at all?
I've had a lot of very successful games with the English where we don't even get to knights first.
Yeah.
Your longbow archers can defend against knights pretty well, and just having a few in the city is going to slow down at least, and then you can bring lings or catapult or something like that and kill the knights and continue on. When I'm in the ancient era, I'm really more interested in getting a galley than getting knights, because there's a lot of good die cities on islands on most maps. So I want to get my settlers out there because there's not always a lot of die right around where I end up settling London or where my settlers spawn. Sometimes I have maps where I can get 2 or 3 die spots and get the cities on them right away, but I think the last few times I've played England, there hasn't really been a lot of die right around me, but as soon as I get settlers out on a galley, find some nice die fish spots or double die or whatever, and suddenly my tech engine really can kick in. The other thing I like to do when I get those cities out on die is I don't tech right away. I use them to build up some gold reserves because each die it's going to give me 5 gold per turn. So if I've got 3 of those and I spend 5 turns just work gold, I believe that would be 75 gold, which is really going to help me later when I start expanding a lot.
So, yeah.
Should we move on to medieval?
Yeah.
I guess I should add here before we get into the medieval and industrial is I don't really find the medieval or industrial bonuses as that useful. +1 naval combat, that's a little bit of help, but not necessarily. It's not a game changer. It might help you not get your ship sunk and you can sink other people's boats, but that's not really the greatest deal.
I personally find that particular bonus to be much more useful later on than when I first see it, because the +1 naval combat, it's on defense too, will add to the naval support you're receiving. It will also mean that if I have a cruiser fleet and I'm the English and you have a cruiser fleet and you're Chinese or something like that, I can probably attack your cruiser fleet and probably win. Whereas if you attack me, the odds are against you.
Well, it increases your ability to just camp outside a city, too, and not feel as threatened.
Right. And you try to rule the seas. A lot of people do that with the English and the Spanish, is they say, sink anything that floats. But I don't like losing my ships. I don't attack boats unless I'm feeling lucky or kind of whatever. They're expensive to me, and I don't just rush them to go out and attack other boats unless I really feel like there's something valuable on their boat. But as far as a bonus, I don't feel like it's a game changer, and I don't think it's, anything to be like, ooh, I've got +1 naval combat now. This changes everything.
Right.
And the same thing with +1 hammers from hills.
I like that one, but yeah, it's not huge.
Right.
It's not a game changer. I like having it. Makes hills, just a regular hill, as good as a quest. Normally hills aren't so great for production. Makes it good if you have a workshop. Super good if you have a workshop and a factory. It comes one era earlier than when the Spanish get it. And a production bonus, the sooner you get it, the better.
Right. But as far as what I'm doing in the medieval, I usually tech up to a code of laws, alphabet writing, then code of laws, and I just try to expand. And I usually probably make too many archers, but I like to be kind of safe. And it's easy to claim some map with archers because other people are going to have trouble killing them, and you can kind of claim it a little bit more map to set down your cities. I don't work too fast. I'm not selling everything just to put out 5 more cities as quick as possible. I don't feel pressed with them. I feel like I can kind of take my time as long as I'm going at a decent pace. They're not going to just fly by me and get tanks really fast. I'm not worried about anything till then. And I'm looking for more dye. I usually get navigation and go to the islands, try to find cities with whale and dye. Just kind of prepping everything for the modern era a lot of times.
Yeah, I'm the same way. And I like to get construction with the English because a free workshop and then you get additional production on top of that. You get to be able to have pretty good production centers. Personally, I don't usually start spitting knights out really until I have to or until I see a great advantage in doing it. So sometimes I don't even get feudalism until the industrial.
Same here.
Modern era, that's where it all comes together.
That's where the magic happens for Thrasher, at least.
That's where the magic happens. Well, you might have gotten knights early on. You might have made some gains with them. You might have just cost your enemies some money. You might have just cost yourself some money. Once you get into modern, a lot of people like to have tanks, which makes a lot of sense because tanks are really good. With English, forget tanks. You don't need tanks. You probably will never need tanks. You might want tanks, but you really don't need them. What you need is first a cruiser fleet, and then as soon as you can, a battleship fleet. Basically, the way naval support works is it adds half of the attack strength of the supporting fleet to your offense and defense. An English cruiser fleet, a veteran, has, I think, 31.5 attack and defense. Mm-hmm. So if you think about it, if you have a non-vet warrior with the cruiser fleet, you have 32.5 on attack and defense for just a warrior or whatever you're using. When I get to 24 tech, if it's time to go to war, I will just load up my cruiser fleet with a bunch of random junk, whatever I can find. Like, oh, here's an archer, here's a warrior I haven't used, here's a catapult, here's the catapult I got for free. Oh, I actually made some knights here. Let's put them on the fleet too and just go to town because they're all going to get that plus 31.5 both on attack and defense. So any unit that has an attack strength is going to be really powerful. And when you get your battleship fleet, that's plus 58.5, I think. It's just ridiculous. So now my warrior has 59.5 attack, which is better than a tank army.
And what is the battleship's defensive power?
It's ridiculous. It's off the scale. Forget about it. Nobody's going to kill it.
Right. I mean, you don't really even need modern infantry, though. If you do have modern infantry and the battleship, nothing's going to hurt you. Bombers, they're going to have to sink your battleships first. Your modern infantry or even riflemen, you'll have 120, 140 defense, I mean, it's just insane. Nothing's going to take that out but a nuke or a mass amount of units.
If you take an English city and there's a battleship fleet sitting there, you have to kill the battleship fleet first, which is really hard. You will never do better than a coin flip to kill it.
Yeah.
And that is if you have bombers and samurai castle.
That's why I like this kind of, I'm going to go at my own pace with the English, because once I get to the modern era and you haven't killed me, you're going to have a lot of units to survive. figure out some way to kill me because I'm probably not going to go down once I have some ships on the sea. Mm-hmm. But I've had so many games where I just couldn't close out the English, and then they drop off single riflemen with the battleship fleet and just start wiping out my modern infantry, or, it's just retarded.
It's what?
It's really funny to kill modern infantry armies with an archer or a warrior.
I believe this is probably the strongest modern era bonus.
Yeah.
American ×3 factory is pretty good, but they don't need any more production. Most of the other modern era bonuses aren't really that great to begin with. So they kind of play a lot different from how I play most other civs. Most other civs, I want to win as soon as possible. With them, I'm like, well, just going to wait for an opening. If it's for knights, if I feel like I can do that, I'll go ahead and attack with knights. But usually people aren't going to kill me early. They're going to have to race past me to beat me. And that's why they're a really good civ. They aren't affected as much by what else is going on in the game as other civs.
I can kind of tell that how to defend against the English is take them out before they get to the modern era.
You have to. Or you have to really quickly win an economic victory or something like that.
If it makes it to modern, yeah.
I guess one other thing I would like to add, just about tech, all you need is 24 techs. So just figure out the best way to get steam power and steel, and that's it. You don't really need anything else. Industrialization Corporation are probably the only other ones. Be very efficient. The more efficient, the more text you can cut out, the quicker you can get to the modern era, and faster you'll get. Once I learned how to just kind of cut out those texts that I don't need, the better and better I got with them.
You don't need riflemen, you don't need modern infantry.
And if for some reason you do, you can get those really quickly later. But if you can focus on production and getting those ships out, that's just all you need.
How to defend against a skilled English player?
Well, you have a few options.
Take them out early and often.
You got to kill them before they get archers. And even a single archer can be hard to kill. The other way is to press them early. I like to try to just choke out their map. Just don't let them have a place to expand to. They can't get to the modern era if they don't have more cities. And they're probably not going to come at you with horses. They're not going to come at you with a warrior rush or anything.
Yep. English, they don't really have any bonus that help them expand better. So if you're sticking units in their face and stuff like that, they may have a hard time expanding. And then you can maybe leave them in the dust. Get out a lot of cities. Well, they're having trouble getting out a lot of cities. And if you get tanks while they still have 11 techs or something like that, then it's just a walk.
But speaking more practically, as far as Eldrash and I, we both said we don't like to do the quick night rushes. But as with any quick rush, it's more popular online than it is with a lot of the top players. That's probably the most common strategy you'll see online is an English player. They're going to have knights coming at you really fast.
Right.
They'll basically sell out on that night rush. And so if you see the English, you have to be prepared for that. You should probably get some counterattack units in place. They probably won't hit you before 1000 BC, but sometime in between 1000 BC and 0 AD, you probably want to have some catapults or some legions or some decent defenses. And I like to use single units. So they'll attack and maybe their knights will take a wound, and then you can attack with one of your counterattacking armies like a legion army or a catapult army and kill them easily.
Or even a horse army if you have one left over. They work fine too.
That's the most common strategy. Yeah. Most English players aren't holding out till the modern era, even though that's probably the most powerful way to go. You don't have to sell out for those knights, but you'll see a lot of ancient era night rushes, or a lot of people that sometimes take their time with the night rush, but then bring an archer army along with it and put the archer army right there so you can't counterattack. That can be very tough to deal with, especially if they have a great leader as their first great person. They'll have some elite knights, and they'll park an elite longbow archer army and an elite knight army right by your capital, and all you've got is archers. It's actually really tough to deal with that.
The good news is that against the English, you'll probably only have to face one or two knight armies, so if you manage to kill them, probably going to be okay for a while. Some other civs might bring 5 or 10 knight armies when they go to war. The English will tend not to have the resources to put that many knights out before 0.
That's true.
Is it the attraction of having the longbow archers and it causes people to try and build up on them and not put any resources towards the knights, or is it just their production is so poor at that point that even if you blow past the archers?
It's not even about poor production. It's just that early in the game, sort of having a great scientist researching feudalism, it's 140 beakers. If you have like some 3, 5, 6 cities, that's going to take a few turns, and hopefully you have some workers left over to bank some production to build those knights, but it's expensive to do. Now, some other civs, which we'll hopefully talk about in future episodes. Like the Germans and the Americans have tricks to get all those knights out faster, but the English don't have any special tricks. They just have monarchy, and that's about it.
Yeah, and then later on, the production bonus from hills. But the die squares have helped me with kind of those Hail Mary night rushes. Once I get feudalism and all the cities where I'm not going to be actually producing the knights out of, I'll switch all those other cities into gold. That is a way where they can maybe get a couple more knight armies out than other civics could, but it's still 25 hammers is a lot in the ancient or early medieval.
Yeah, if he's in medieval, that's 75 gold to rush or 25 hammers, and if you're getting 5 gold from a die square, that helps, but it's not going to get you to 10 knight armies.
Right, and so if you beat that, if you kill one of their knight armies, they probably just poured 10 or 15 turns all into sending 1 or 2 armies at you. And basically, they probably won't be expanding much. And so if you can just spend a couple turns, if you can be like, okay, the English are in the game, I can probably expect knights, just spend 5 turns instead of they're doing 15 turns, on getting a few units, getting your house in order. You should be prepared for that.
Is that your point to attack, though? If you take out a knight army of theirs, you say, okay, their production has to be nil at this point, I can go ahead and just try and rush in and take them out early, or is that just the point that you ignore them and say, okay, I know they're down there and it's time to hit them up later?
That's the point where I would say, okay, I killed those knights, maybe there'll be more coming, so maybe I need another catapult army somewhere, and I'm going to keep expanding.
Right.
Because probably he's got an archer army.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. He's putting his production into archer armies a little bit because he doesn't have that much, and he's put whatever production he has left over into knights to either touch other people's territory or just to do a small rush to try and take out an undefended city or undefended capital. But is there any trigger point that you say, okay, he's done that, I can attack now, or is it just somebody you just keep the water boiling and try and get them later?
If I have fundamentalism or something like that, maybe bringing some catapults down, see if that works, might do the trick. But a non-vet archer army in London has, 22.5 defense or something like that? Mm-hmm. So the catapult army is just as likely to lose. If you bring a few, it might work, but
it's tough. I don't attack them for knights usually, and that's only if I have a lot of knights and and a lot of upgrades.
It's better if you had, say, like 2 catapult armies and you're like, wow, I just killed his knights. I don't know. I would probably tend to just keep those for defense and try to expand more and tech more.
And press them out. It's probably a better idea to press them out because it's very hard to kill the English early, but you don't want to let them live late. It's kind of a catch-22.
What is the best era to beat the English then?
I would say industrial or modern.
Right.
But you're modern before they are.
Oh, well, yeah.
I'd say I'm in modern, and he's got 10 turns before he hits modern.
Then you'd go crazy.
And the best way to probably beat them is just to win the tech race and have more cities. You're going to have to send a whole bunch of forces down to kill them in the early game. Once you get to tanks, you should be able to handle them pretty well. Some civs, like the Arabs, the Americans, the Germans, they can do that. They can start flooding the map or bring some really strong forces. And the Indians as well. Kind of a balancing act.
Or you could try to get bombers. There's a trick using Oxford University. If you get bombers before the English players steal, then you can use the bombers to sink all of his cruiser fleets, and then that should work pretty well.
Definitely.
England, great civ or greatest civ?
they're all the greatest.
Yes, they
That was the point of the game, I think.
Yeah. Well, I guess I can walk right into that. And if we're done with the offense, we can talk about how to defend against a skilled English player.
But I guess one other thing I would like to add, just about tech.
Never mind. That was my beautiful segue.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, just go on with the segue.
No. Hit it.
We'll cut it up later. It'll be fine. Great person, a little bit fatter.
Well, it sounds like that would be a great way to win, so how would you defend against the English?
For more information about Revcast, sibling shows Polycast and Modcast, or about Polycast in general, log on to the series' official website, polycast.net. Record date January 20th, 2010.
Civilization Revolution Sounds clips copyright Take-Two Interactive.
Copyright Civilized Communication at civcom.net.